Life isn't perfect, and neither are we.
Nope. But we know how to face our fears
And have some fun.
and talk about all the messiest things of life.
Like the messiest things.
Get connected to yourself, get connected to others, and get connected to the life right in front of you.
This is The Connected Life with Justin and Abi.
That's me.
That's you.
And you.
Hey, friends, before we kick off this week's episode, we got a little surprise for you.
Yeah, we are doing a conference on boundaries for free. We want to invite you.
What?
I know. We want to invite you to come learn about boundaries while we have none. No, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. But we want you to be able to be a part of it. We have a school, the Life Consulting Masterclass. It's a 3-year program. And every year we do conferences where there's a deep dive on different subjects. And this year we're inviting you to join the school for the conference on boundaries.
Yeah,
it'll
come
be
hang out.
interactive. It'll be fun. It'll be empowering.
Yeah, it's going to be a really good time. And it's October 18th and the 19th, Friday and a Saturday. All you have to do is go to Justin and Abi, that's abi.com/boundaries. And you can get all the extra details there. You can sign up for it. We'll send you a little something in your email. And check your spam.
You have to respond. You have to get the email and
Yeah.
respond to it to be able to come. Because
Yeah.
last time, all the links got lost in spam.
Yeah. So go check out that spam folder if you don't find it right away after you hit send.
Yeah.
Okay?
Okay.
So, hey, without further ado, here's the episode you're wanting to watch. With your powers combined, you are neurodivergent.
I mean, with our powers separately, we are also still neurodivergent.
It just sounds like a superhero thing.
Yeah.
Like, I'm neurodivergent.
Yes.
We're like Pinky and the Brain.
Very
What
much.
shall we do tonight? Try to take over the world?
Try to take over the world.
Hey,
Hey, Pinky and the Brain. How you two doing?
which one's
I'll be
Pinky?
the brain. You can be Pinky.
But have you guys heard the fan
Hello.
theory that Pinky is the actual brain?
Oh,
I have heard that
Yeah.
he's actually the super genius
Yeah, he's the
behind
super
it all.
genius. Yeah.
Yeah.
didn't watch it enough to know or care, but I'm
Um,
glad you guys did.
Exposed.
Guys, I'm really glad we get to hang out together
Me
today.
too.
To-
For those of you who are just joining us, Ruth is our dear, dear friend who used to live with us.
Oh, you used to live in there in Reading with us,
Mhm.
and then lived with us during the pandemic, which
I
was
did.
really fun.
That's part of the pandemic to
It
me,
Mhm.
was.
was living with you.
We had
And
lots
then
of bad dates, lots of...
That
that
sounded
sounds
weird.
very weird.
Sounded
I
odd.
heard it fall out of my mouth and then thought,
I can't pick that back up.
hang on a minute. Watched a lot of Community.
Yes.
There we go.
We
That's
did.
saved it.
That's good.
Hung out and watched TV.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then she left us and she went back to her homeland,
Uh-huh.
which is England. And now she is in Scotland.
Scotland.
And
Mhm.
she is studying to get her doctorate
I am.
Yep.
In clinical psychology.
in clinical psychology, which is just delightful for both of us.
Delightful.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
You're chasing after your dreams, and I'm getting to have great conversations
Yeah, it's really fun. Like you have all this,
without having to write any papers.
you have these smart things to say, and I'm like, you're smart now.
Mhm.
Yeah, it's funny. I'll have a conversation and then I'll hear about what we've talked about in the conversation somewhere else. And I'll be like, oh, concept taken.
You're saying like we'll have conversations, and then you'll hear something in school.
Uh-huh.
Is what
Yeah,
you're
yeah,
saying?
yeah.
I know. Your school is constantly confirming that we're smart.
Yeah, basically.
Yeah.
Basically
We're good at what
confirming
we
that you're
do.
Pinky in the Brain.
We're
Yeah,
thinking the
yeah.
brain.
Yeah.
Taking over the world. Well, today we're going to have a conversation around something that like hits home for both of you. A little bit
Yep.
for me.
Hello.
A little bit.
Yeah.
A little bit for
Come on.
me.
But mostly for us.
But mostly for you too.
Mhm.
We're going to have a conversation about neurodivergence.
Mhm.
Mhm.
And not necessarily, I don't know what kind of depth you're going to go into that, but we're going to talk about the impact on your personal world. Because I think that this is something that's very relatable to so many people.
Yeah.
Especially as, I don't know, I don't know what's happening. Society, it seems to be evolving with a lot more autism. Like the
Mhm.
numbers are increasing and things
And
like that.
ADHD, OCD.
And I don't think it's just a label being slapped on people randomly. Like
Mhm.
it's just an increase in a label. Like there's something that has increased. I don't know what's causing it. I'm not the person to talk about that,
Good.
but we can have the conversation about the impact on you guys as individuals that I think is going to be relatable to a lot of people.
Yeah. Well,
Sounds great.
let's start with us just sharing our stories, and then we'll talk about I think it's really important to have conversations about different ways that different people's brains work, because it relieves a lot of shame if you can hear that there's not just one way. And if you can start to understand maybe the reason that I felt behind, or the reason that I felt out of control, or the reason is actually because of something going on. And maybe I can have compassion towards that instead of judging it and hating myself for it.
Totally. Should I tell mine?
Yeah.
Where do we go? What do I do with my hands?
So I'm dyslexic, and there's probably some other bits of stuff in there as well. But I didn't find out that I was dyslexic until I went to university the first time. So I was 19 years old or something.
Yeah.
And I remember showing up at university and, which this is hysterical. We had exams for the first time in university, and it didn't occur to me, it said on the information, show up for the exam at 10 o'clock. It didn't occur to me that I needed to be there before 10 in order to take my seat.
Honestly, that makes sense.
For the exam.
That makes sense to me.
So I literally showed up at 10 and everyone was sat. There's 300 people sat in this lecture room.
Oh my gosh.
Already starting the exam. And I was like, oh crap. Anyway, side note. So I started university and I couldn't finish an exam, basically. I was just so much slower than everyone else. And my mum had just started working with dyslexic students at a different university somewhere else. She was like, maybe you're dyslexic. So I went and got tested, and I was.
Wow.
And it was one of the most revelatory things that had ever happened to me, because there were so many spaces inside of schooling and inside of life where I felt, on the one hand, really smart and intelligent. I get these concepts. I know how to learn really well. I can put ideas together in my head. But on the other hand, so not intelligent.
Totally.
I remember being in school and getting put in the remedial English class.
Oh.
Because I completely tanked a spelling test.
Oh, yeah.
Couldn't spell house. Or I can't even remember. I couldn't do, I could never learn my times tables.
Yeah.
I couldn't, if you tried to get me to do mental maths, a sum
Impossible.
in my head, impossible. Really slow at reading. I remember my exams, in high school, friends talking about how much work they were doing. And in the back of my head, I'm like, I'm doing 4 times as much work. And it was driven by this fear of there's something so not smart about me that if I don't try extra hard, I'm going to fail.
Totally.
In some way. And so when I found out that I was dyslexic and there was reasons for
why things were so
hard. Things were so difficult, why things were so challenging, why I did things like show up for the exam on the dot, or another thing I'll do. This is hysterical. On the trip over here, just a couple of weeks ago, I booked a flight from San Francisco to Reading. I accidentally booked it on the wrong date.
Yeah.
So I show up at San Francisco airport and they're like, your flight was yesterday, hon.
Oh, no.
No. I'm not even kidding. Just things like
that
this.
Is a very common stance.
Yeah. And I live in constant states of anxiety about these things happening. I'm going to mix up the number. I'm going to get the time wrong. I'm going to, there's so much stress and anxiety around what have I missed? Because I must have missed something.
Oh, yeah.
Directions, sense of spatial awareness. You've seen me drive a car.
It's terrifying.
I would drive these guys around and we'd go to a grocery store or something and be like, why have you parked so far away?
Ruth would park at the last space available. And I was so confused. And it was so that she didn't have to park near any cars because she was so scared of not understanding.
Of hitting them.
Yeah.
Which I live in constant fear. When I park a car, I'm like, I'm going to get too close. I'm going to smash into it.
Yep.
Does that feel like that has to do with dyslexia as well?
Yes.
It's spatial awareness.
So it's
spatial awareness,
so I have poor spatial awareness, poor time awareness, poor depth perception. The list goes on. So like learning to drive was really hard for me. So there's all these like practical things at school that just felt difficult. But on the one hand, I knew I was smart.
Yeah.
And so then getting the diagnosis of dyslexia, I was like, oh,
yeah.
Okay.
How did you know you were smart?
Because I knew that I could get like I remember being in school and being able to get really complicated concepts like in chemistry or biology but then the basic fundamentals I
cannot do 2 + 2, but I definitely can understand this organic compound and how it disintegrates.
Exactly. And I could spiel off to you how all the things bond and the atoms and the electrons and
that is funny.
Yeah, but I can't do 5 × 2 in my head.
Which is interesting because I can imagine that there is a level where you could feel really stupid. Yeah. Dealing with that.
Wow, rude.
But you are one of the most brilliant people I know.
Yeah.
Like you have an ability to ingest concepts and then digest them and then express them in a very wonderful way. I'm like, oh, she's so smart and she carries so much information. So
yeah, and she actually has her IQ has been tested. She's in the top 2.5% in the world.
That doesn't surprise me.
And and I love that because most people don't have the proof. And so that there's this constant battle between this part of them that feels like, I feel like I'm really capable in certain areas and completely incapable in other areas. Yeah. And that battle can make us confused about our own self, confused about like, am I smart? Am I stupid? Am I? Yeah. And typically we think in black and white terms. Am I smart or stupid? Am I good or bad? Instead of there's areas that my brain really excels and there's areas that my brain has a hard time with. Yeah. And one of the things that getting a diagnosis does is it helps you start to be able to hold both truths. And I wish we could hold both truths without a label. Like ultimately it'd be best in society if we could say most of us have areas we're smart and areas that are a struggle for us. Yeah. But a diagnosis really adds on top of that. I'm sure when you got the diagnosis, you were like, there's a reason that these things are hard. And that doesn't mean that this is more true. Like, I think we're constantly weighing, is it more true that I'm smart or is it more true that I'm dumb? Yeah. And so that makes every life task high stakes because every time you fail, it's a drop in the I'm dumb bucket. And every time you succeed, it's a drop in the I'm smart bucket. And so that constant stress of weighing, am I good or bad? Am I smart or dumb? Am I capable or incapable is very, it's a heavy weight to bear and it is impossible to measure that way. Yeah.
I want to say that it's very easy for people to get trapped under labels and be like, well, this just means something bad about me. Right. Yeah. But we can also approach things like this is information that helps me understand myself better, the ways that I'm wired, and then gives me a map on how to change the trajectory of how I operate inside of life. Like it actually can be a big gift, which I know you're going to talk about your story too as well inside of this, but it actually can be a really big gift instead of like, oh, this just means this is what I am and I'm stuck in this. I'm like, okay, then what does that mean in how I'm now going to approach myself and approach life? And I don't learn the same as other people. That's okay.
Yeah. And it's interesting that you bring that up. Like it's a big sort of area of debate, I guess, inside of psychology and psychiatry, this idea of diagnosis. Yes. And
is it helpful or destructive?
Yeah, helpful or destructive. Like, is it validating on the one hand to receive a diagnosis and have a level of understanding about what's going on inside of you and why your brain's putting things together the way that it is? Or is it confining? And then do I feel debilitated by it? Yeah, victimized, I guess, a victim to the label, I guess. Yeah. And I can't find ways around things. And I don't think it's a one size fits all. I think there's spaces where diagnosis can feel validating. And I think there's spaces where diagnosis can feel a bit disempowering. Yes. And I guess that is a source of tension for people, for me as well. Like it'd be really easy for me to say, well, do you know what, Justin? I just can't show up on time for your podcast. Totally. Because I'm dyslexic. So you're just going to have to deal with my chaos. But I don't do that because there's a space there where I want to honor and respect the people around me. And I want to be able to feel powerful in spaces in my life, even where dyslexia creeps in.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
it's a very interesting thing. Even in my own journey with being diagnosed, I was going to say diagnosis. I was like, that's not
diagnosis.
But, which for those of you listening have been diagnosed with dyslexia, ADHD, and ASD. So, which we'll talk about all of that as we go on. But there are pockets where it's been incredibly empowering. Like once I knew I had ADHD and dyslexia, part of that is your short-term memory issues. I was like, okay, then I have to create hacks. There's no way to survive as a human unless I create a roadmap around these crazy loops my brain does. And so it became very inspiring and empowering, almost like I was actually held captive before that.
Wow, yeah.
By just like, I was powerless to create a roadmap because I didn't even understand why I couldn't do things. And I think I felt so much shame and overwhelm from not being capable at certain things that I would just go into collapse. I would just shut down and I wouldn't try. So when I got the diagnosis, those two diagnoses, I was like, oh, I can do something about this. This isn't just that I'm broken. I think before that, I felt like I was broken. On the flip side, there are several things that I like when they come up. Before I was diagnosed, I would push through to do just because I was like, you have to. And now I'll be like, I can't really do that because I'm dyslexic. I can't really do that because I don't have spatial awareness. I can't really do that. And before I had the diagnosis, I was like, okay, I'm going to make myself do this.
Yeah. Because I think you're hitting on a really important point there, which is the shame that people can feel like I should be able to, for the love of God. Like I'm 30 something years old. I should be able to book a flight on the right day.
Yes.
I should be able to.
Absolutely.
Because, and then there's this comparison idea that happens constantly about like, well, what's wrong with me? Why am I so lazy?
Yeah.
Why am I so unorganized? Why am I so chaotic? And I forgot where I was going with this. What did you say? That was short-term working memory problem.
Two people that are completely. This is a very common. This is a very common situation.
This is literally short-term working memory in action. I had a thought, I went with it, and then I was like, it's gone.
Which is a very real ADHD or dyslexic quality. I was talking about how some of it empowered me and some of it I've just been like, I guess I can't do that.
Oh yeah, there we go. And then so once you had the diagnosis and you were able to have more compassion and understanding for yourself, you stopped comparing yourself in the same way.
Yeah. But I also gave up on some things.
Right.
And that's the thing where I'm like,
You're saying that you used it in some ways as an excuse.
To
not be powerful.
Here's a great example. I also
getting out of the car and making me park it for you.
No, I was literally going to give that example. I was actually going to do that. I have bad.
I can't back up, Justin. Take it. What?
Yeah, I have no spatial awareness. All of the car accidents I got in were like a parking accident where I'm pulling in or pulling out, and it's like I'm going so slow and it's like just a foot away, but I can't. And thank God for the backup cameras have saved my life. They've really changed things. Those beep, beep, beeps letting you know. Thank God they came up with those. But I will now, because I know it's so hard for me. And now I have like an understanding. When I get into a situation, I just jump out of the car and ask anyone in the car to park it. And I'm like, in the past, I would have just done it.
Right.
And actually, I could have done it. It would have taken me a long time and a lot of anxiety, but I could have done it. And so that's the pro and con I see. Yeah.
I do want to add, you were talking about your journey before the diagnosis and then after. Before, there were places where I didn't understand why you did some of the things that you did.
Are you talking about Ruth or me?
You.
Oh.
Yeah. And there were a lot of times where I got frustrated. It felt like someone who was purposely not doing certain things because I didn't know. I was just like,
right.
no, we can all do this. You're just not doing it.
We're choosing not to do this.
Why are you choosing not to do this?
It felt like stubborn, willful, purposefully hurting you.
Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And so it was like daggers to me. I'm like, why does she not care enough to just do this stuff she could learn, but she doesn't care. She just leaves it on me to do. There was a lot of that stuff, which two parts to that. One, me not knowing felt like an attack on me as a human being. And it also then she ended up probably walking away feeling judged and very hurt. And it probably reinforced you feeling stupid. So there's a lot of pain inside that without having more information. You just don't know.
Yeah.
So you're at that struggle. And then once you got the diagnosis, I'm sitting there I remember, Ruth, you talked to her about the whole dyslexia
how I got
thing.
diagnosed, which is
You're like, I think you might be dyslexic.
Well, Ruth came in. Ruth was working with me for a season, and we worked together like every day. And Ruth just slowly started to say, "Why'd you do that way?"
I'm like, that's an interesting thought to put together or way to approach that problem.
And then she was like, do you think that you could be dyslexic? And I was like, nah.
There's like little alarm bells going off in my head. I'm like, this reminds me of me.
Oh, yes. And then finally, I was terrified to believe that it could be true because it looked so exciting to me. It felt like winning the lottery. I felt like, you mean there's a reason for all of the struggle? Because I am very similar to you. I am like so incapable in certain areas and then very powerful in other areas. And it has been such a wrestle my whole life with who am I? Am I this version of myself or am I this version of myself? And no matter how many times I do powerful, like great things, it doesn't translate to everything. And so it just kept being like, I'm neither of these. And so when you were like, there could be a reason, I was like, this is too good to be true. There could be a reason that I struggle so much in so many areas.
Well,
I do remember that.
I wouldn't believe you until I had talked to somebody about it.
Yeah.
Because I was like, no, that'd be too nice. That would feel too good.
I do remember you looping over and over again, like, no, that can't be true. I just am scared to believe that it's true. Like, that would be so relieving if it was. What if I believe that I'm dyslexic and then it turns out I'm not?
What if I'm a fraud at dyslexia? What if the learning disability I think I have, I actually don't? What if and then that's the question of like, what if I really am just made broken, which I think is one of the core human questions. I think so many of us struggle with is we're scared of the idea, am I made broken? Am I made wrong? Am I made different? And we're constantly collecting evidence to see if it's true or not. And neurodivergence can just fall into that bucket.
Yeah. Which that ultimately, going back to what I was saying, which is once we got the diagnosis that was happening there, I suddenly had to say, she's not capable of this. And there was a transition period where I had to re-encode that this isn't just an issue of will. This is an issue of this isn't possible
right
under this current condition. And then all of a sudden, once I understood that, I could go, okay, I need to figure out how I adjust to that. And you got to figure out how to work with it more. And there was that combined, like working together.
What it confirmed for me, like one of the things I learned, both ADHD and dyslexia, is they can't sequence well. And we've had a couple episodes on ADHD. If you're listening, you want to look back. But sequencing is I can't figure out the steps. Like maybe I'm looking at the house and I need to clean it. It's really hard for me to break down what steps to do and in which order. That feels really difficult. And so there's a lot of things like that when knowledge is power. So when I learned I can't sequence, I was able to pull in people and ask for help, like help me know how to sequence. When I learned about time, I was like, oh, I actually just can't manage time. Instead of me being defensive about that.
Yeah.
What if I start to ask people, I need to be at the airport for a flight at this time. What time should I leave? I just ask.
Yeah, break it. Help me break this down. Yeah.
And I have them break it down for me how they think about it, because the repetitive nature eventually starts to create habits for me where then I can do things on my own more.
Yeah. Yep. So that was just a game changer, but it took us both of us approached it in a way to collaborate on it. And then also grace was injected inside of the circumstance. Again, going back to these things can be something that we want to avoid knowing about. Like, I don't want to know that. A lot of times, whether it's health issues or it's learning issues or whatever it is, we don't want to look at stuff. We want to live in denial about it oftentimes, rather than, oh, this can actually open up the door to me living a better, more abundant life if I understand myself better. Whether that's on an emotional level or it's in a level like this.
Yeah.
You know?
And I think it's a really important part of it as well is recognizing a lot of the strengths that come with neurodivergence. So like I mentioned, my mum works with students who are dyslexic, and she used to use this analogy all the time, which is people who are not neurodivergent get from A to B on the motorway.
On the freeway.
On the freeway, yeah, sorry.
American.
And the Americans, yeah. And people who are dyslexic take the windy back road. Secret option number C.
Yeah.
Which
number
makes you...
C. There you go. There you go. Secret option
Touché.
number C.
Yeah, you're getting it all. This is all like, what do you call, case in point.
Yeah.
It happening in front of you. Take secret option C, right? Which takes longer to get there, but you've actually seen more along the way.
Yeah.
And also, if the freeway is shut down, you have no problems figuring out another way to get there, because you've never been able to drive the freeway.
Yeah.
So when an option doesn't work, there's often such a high capacity to be flexible to find a way around it.
Yeah. And neurodivergent people tend to be excellent problem solvers, and they tend to be very creative thinkers because they're constantly having to think around the fact, I can't perceive time.
Sure.
So how will I ever get anywhere on time?
Right.
So there are actually loads of hacks that are going on inside of people. You'll often also find that people with neurodivergence are really empathetic and really emotionally intelligent, because there's so much of life out here that feels out of control. So we look for a sense of control inside and being able to perceive people and interact with people. And so you'll often find people great at pattern recognition inside of people, or empathy, or again, why was I talking about strengths?
I don't know, but it's a superpower.
Yeah. You're talking about how there's the balance in there.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's what I was saying. So you were talking about the journey of understanding, okay, maybe some of the difficulties that Abi had, and that gave you more grace and compassion for her.
Yeah.
And it empowered her more. But also there's the space where you can recognize the things that you're really strong at. And I think it gives you another level of appreciation for those things.
Yeah. I want to add to that, because there's a brilliance to the way that you'll navigate stuff. So there's been a lot more rigid thinking and black and white thinking in the way that I do stuff. And then when I've hit a wall, I'm like, I don't know a way around this. I know how to do the thing that I've been given, and I can do it really well. But then when I run out of the freeway, right? I'm like, I can't do anything. And you're like, there's a million things you could do. And I'm like, no, there's not. You're a liar. You don't know. And she's on her back road, just winding around. And it's actually incredible.
Yeah.
And I don't know I don't know if you guys know the statistics on how many executives.
Oh, there's a huge number of CEOs that have ADHD or dyslexia.
Or something like that. But that's because they've had to learn how to do life. And I joked about it with your powers combined, you are neurodivergent. But it actually is, in some ways, becomes a superpower if you choose to be powerful with it. If you choose to engage your life versus like run away and shut down and collapse in on yourself, it can actually make you vastly more capable than other people.
Yeah.
It's really interesting. So you guys mentioned I was back in school doing my doctorate, and there's so many spaces where I'm noticing my dyslexia coming up again, afresh. But a real thing that I've noticed that actually is quite helpful is I'll have so many of my classmates who get so stressed out like out of their mind, stressed out about deadlines and will this work out and how's this going to be, and very like perfectionist type
and you didn't even
thinkers.
realize there was a deadline.
100%. And I'm like noticing this like kind of toxic trait that I have, which is like, it'll work out. Do I know how? No. Do I have a study plan? No. Do I know when the deadline is? No. But it'll work out.
That's so funny. I do think that learning has empowered you, even in doing your doctorate. You talked about noticing things about your own, what causes you anxiety. Do you want to share a little bit about a couple of those?
Yeah. So I like always, when you go through school and you're like, oh, I like certain things, I don't like certain things. I have always hated group work. Like I have always definitely preferred to work on my own. Like I hated studying in the library with other people. I hated any kind of collaboration with other people. And I was like, am I just so antisocial? Like, why is this the case? And then I'm sat in class now and I'm realizing, oh, the reason I hate this is because I'm so much slower than everyone else. So we've been given like a case study to read through. And then the idea is to discuss the case study. They've all finished it within 5 minutes and I'm still halfway through reading the case study.
Yes.
And then the conversation's moved on and I was like, oh, there's so many moments where I just have to smile and I'm like, yeah, try and contribute to the conversation. And I have no idea what's going on because I haven't had time to finish reading the thing, let alone process it and come up with thoughts.
Yes.
But I also notice how quickly I put thoughts together on the spot and just kind of BS my way through certain situations.
Like what you're doing right now.
Like what I'm doing right now, yeah. I have a great ability to like talk like I know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
And it's because of that. It's because there's so many spaces where I just wasn't tracking.
Right.
And I felt so much shame to like slow everybody else down and be like, I'm sorry, I haven't finished reading the case study.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. That's what I was saying. When you have self-awareness, it can start to unravel why things cause you anxiety, why you avoid things. And then you can begin to be more intentional and like compassionate with yourself in those situations.
Yeah.
Understanding, like once I know, oh, I'm avoiding this because of this, then I can be powerful and make choices.
Yeah.
Which is a really big difference.
Yeah. And now I can articulate it to people.
Yeah.
I could be like, oh, I'm sorry, I can't read the case study that quickly.
Yeah.
So you guys carry on and have a conversation and I'll just catch up.
Yes. But see, you didn't have the power to do that until you actually understood what was going on inside of you. There's always a way that we can be powerful once we have the pieces to the puzzle.
Yeah.
I'm not on the outside. I want to talk about me.
Okay.
Are you going to take over the world?
Getting diagnosed this year.
Yeah. I'm going to talk about my diagnosis this year.
Yeah.
And I'm just going to be over here cracking jokes.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, that's fine.
Make fun of me all you want. Play. It's interesting because we shared this on the podcast in a previous episode, but I ended up going into the Amen clinic, Dr. Daniel Amen's clinic. Both of us, Abi and I did. And we talked about this in the podcast before, but they were checking out our brains. And I was pretty convinced like, hey, I have a problem with memory and I need you guys to confirm this. Thank you very much. And tell me what to do with it. Only like when we sat down and she went to have the conversation with me, she was like, you don't have a problem with memory. I'm like, maybe you're not good at your job.
I beg to differ.
Totally.
My wife begs to differ.
Yeah. But then she was like, no, you have a problem with focus. And I was like, what does that mean? And then she was like, you actually have ADD. And I was like, okay. And then she starts breaking it down for me. And I start reflecting on my life. And I was thinking about how often I feel tortured inside of conversations with people. Like I will feel deeply tortured and my whole body, like I want to crawl out of my skin inside of conversations. And that's not because someone's terrible or anything like that, but I could never really identify it. And she was like, yeah. Because like, it's the ADD, you're having trouble focusing and you're working really hard to try and focus. And once you can get into focus, you go into you lock onto focus and then you stay strong on it. And so there's times where I can cross over in a conversation and then I'm like, I'm all here and I'm good with it. But until I get there, my whole being is feeling like I'm screaming inside. And all of a sudden, like after she told me that, I was like, I feel better about myself all of a sudden. I make sense to myself all of a sudden.
Oh, yeah.
And I found that, what was it that she was talking about with focus? No, I can't even focus. Yeah. Anyways, it was something that felt very torturous to me inside for a very long time. And I would have people come to me when I would lock into focus finally. And then people would be like, hey, I want a piece of your time. I'd be like, leave me alone.
Oh, he gets so cranky. This has been the aha for everyone who's ever worked with Justin.
I felt like someone was walking up and shooting me in the face with a shotgun, just blowing my face off.
Once he's in focus, if you try to pull him away, he's angry about it.
Yeah.
He feels assaulted.
Our friend Courtney is like, oh my gosh, this makes so much sense now. Now I don't have to feel so hurt about every time I'd run down to your office to say hi and you'd be like, I'm busy, leave me alone. But I would hear footsteps, and as the footsteps came out in the hallway, whether it was her, it was someone else inside of our office space, I would suddenly be like, I have to protect myself. Oh no, my door's open. They're going to steal this from me.
Right.
And it wasn't about like, I was totally okay with giving my time away, and I was okay with giving my attention to someone, just not after I had fought forever to get my attention, because getting back to it felt like nearly impossible.
That makes so much sense. And there's something about neurodivergence, again, where you're having to work extra hard to do something.
To do a normal thing. And
I don't think people often understand how exhausting it is.
Well, it'd be like for me too, like I will have to read and reread and reread stuff that I'm like, I should be moving forward, but why don't I don't know what I just read there. What's wrong with my memory? But I'm like, oh, it's focus.
Yeah.
My brain can't focus on that page and grab it and get present with it. And so ever since I did that just recently, and they put me on some simple stuff to help me, I'm like, I feel much more focused.
Well, and also because now you have grace for yourself. When you're reading the page and then you get interrupted and you have to reread the same thing that you read, and then your brain trails off and you reread the third time. Now, instead of being like, why am I not paying attention? Why can't I get this? Why is this book not interesting? Now you can actually be like, oh, I just haven't gotten into my focus spot yet. And so I need to keep doing this until I get into that focus place, and then it will get easier.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. How has learning that bit of information about yourself changed any assumptions you had about that behavior?
Well, one thing I'll say that learning about this made me reflect on my childhood. Let me go there. That's what pops into my head. Because there were so many times where I would beat up on myself and go into panic because I didn't feel like I was learning fast enough. I wasn't ingesting information fast enough. And there was a battle between me and my dad at times. He had a difficulty in his teaching style that was very real. And there was probably a difficulty in my ability to absorb things that he was saying. And I was able to look back with a sense of compassion for years of being on edge and anxiety that was inside of me about stuff. And I remember a lot of times I'd go into a lot of self-abusive talk where I'd be like, you're such an idiot. Get this together. What's wrong with you? Like my dad would try and show me how to do something, and then he'd leave and he would progressively get frustrated. And I understand he's on a job site. He's trying to do stuff. But when he'd leave the room, my brain would be like, I didn't get a thing that he said. And I would go into a deep self-loathing pit as I'm like maybe trying to wire a room as a teenager. And I'm sitting there, you can figure this out. You can figure this out. And then the anger's growing. The tension in my body's growing. I, at some point, am so overwhelmed with energy that I'm punching a wall, punching a open wood stud with my fist, being like, figure it out. So that was, and I, even since I've thought about that, I've entered back into those moments and been like, Justin, you're not actually capable of doing this. Like there's something that's genuinely off here, and you need a lot of patience for this. And it's not that you're a failure, and it's not that you're stupid. You're very intelligent and capable. You just need a different style of teaching that no one knows how to help you with, and you don't know how to articulate your need for. So that's been very impactful. And I don't know that I answered your thing, but that's.
Yeah. I was thinking about a lot of this explains a lot of anxiety that you've had.
Yeah.
And even in our fights, you easily go into overwhelm and shut down, and then it has become you getting angry or you looking like you're shutting me out. And really what's happening is there's too many things for you to be able to absorb or connect. Yeah. And so one thing that has changed our fights in a revolutionary way is for us to be like, what is one thing that you'd like to be heard about?
Yes.
What is one thing that you want me to hear you about? Instead of like, I want to talk through the entire fight or all of the different triggers that it brought up or all of the different memories that this one thing brings up from our history. And then what can happen is one issue begins to just, it's almost like deep cleaning, how I used to deep clean, where one issue begins to open up 25 other issues. And now you have so many issues opened up. Like I used to deep clean.
Like how you go open cabinet drawers and everything and the whole house is like, looks
all
like
of a sudden it's worse than it was. And that's what conflict was like for us.
That's a great way to describe that. You're saying that right now. I'm like, that's exactly conflict between us.
Yes. And historically. So it dramatically changed.
And it overwhelmed the hell out of me, dude.
Yeah.
Are you okay there?
I was trying to adjust and I'm smiling thinking about it because I'm like, you feel
validated by that.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. And so but even Justin started it. He's like, can you tell me one thing you want to be heard about? But that question creates the invitation to know he wants to hear me. And he was able to communicate. It's easier for me to hear you in bite-sized pieces. And the truth is, it's easier for me to hear Justin in bite-sized pieces. It takes more self-control.
Sure.
And it takes you having to actually decide what is it that I want from this moment, if I can only have one thing. But it has really changed our conflict because now when I say one thing, he can address it. And then what happens? I can
be very present with that one thing.
That's powerful.
And then what happens is we can feel like we work through one thing. And the feeling of we completed something is euphoric in conflict. And that is why so many people get discouraged is because it's like, well, you've opened up this and this and this. Like and now none of them are going to be better.
Papers are smeared everywhere.
Yeah. Instead, if we open up one door and then we close that door, that feeling of we completed a task makes you feel like conflict is doable, which makes you feel like you're more willing to try it. So then Justin I'll say, what's one thing you want to be heard on? And he will do that. And typically that creates a sense of fulfillment that we both got to be heard about one thing. And then that creates momentum and connection where often that will be a full conversation. We'll be able to move forward.
Yeah. Yeah, that's good. It's less than the overwhelming sensation that I've experienced. And again, going back to, I think that the healthy aspect of understanding things like this about ourselves is that you can implement grace. You'd be like, I can't actually do that. That doesn't mean I give up. Excuse me. That doesn't mean that I just quit or that I don't find another route. Like the idea of like, oh, let's try bite off one piece and take that. But it does mean like, oh, there's a whole bunch that is not really my normal ability that I've been trying to force myself to do. That's caused me more problems as it is. So I'm going to let go of trying to be that.
Yeah.
I think that one thing is that it also causes you to embrace imperfection, right? I've noticed that historically when you talk on stage, there's been a lot of times where you'll quote stuff
so wrong.
So wrong.
So wrong. I'll be quoting the Bible and I'll use the wrong name. I'll use the wrong address. I'll use the wrong.
Yeah. And you'll see, people who are strong advocates for performance imperfection express themselves about that in derogatory ways on the internet. And that's okay. They're telling us more about them than they are about you. But you'll see them do that. And you, excuse me, have embraced the sense of imperfection where you're like, I'm not going to let that, push me into trying to be something that I don't have the ability to ingest all that and get that perfect. But I'm going to keep moving forward. And that's been the beauty about your life, is that while other people would decide not to move forward or try at all, you've been like, I'm just going to embrace the imperfection and I'm going to move forward powerfully and just keep trucking along.
Yeah, I've just accepted. I can't tell you how many times, in this conversation, there's been multiple times you've forgotten what you were saying. Yep. That happens to me in front of people all the time.
Yeah.
And I literally just have to ask the audience, what was I saying?
Yeah, that's always funny. What was I saying?
Yeah.
Audience is screaming at you. Yeah, and you're like, oh, thank you.
And there is two ways. You can hate yourself or you can accept what is. And acceptance is one of the most powerful things we can do as humans, because whatever we resist creates suffering.
Yeah.
So when I resist the ways that my brain works, the ways that my body works, it creates suffering. When I accept it, it actually creates grace. So I actually really learned to have a lot of patience for myself. Mm-hmm. And I had people all the time tell me how much they loved it and how relatable it felt and how personal it felt and how they felt like they could do it, that they felt like empowered by it and they felt endeared towards me in it. And I just think we have the power to define if something is going to be lovable about us. And so I've worked at defining that messy is a beautiful part of who I am and what I have to bring.
Yeah.
And I can love me in my messiness and I can love you in your messiness.
And you use that word endearing. Like, this is probably something I find is whenever I fully show up with all of my dyslexic quirks in relationship, people generally find it quite endearing.
Yes.
Or like your stuff,
Human.
I find it very endearing. Or other friends, like, because it's a piece of genuine authenticity. You're like, oh, you're showing me a part of yourself.
Yes.
And that is
it's
always
relatable
endearing
and authentic and connective. Yes. I would much rather someone show me an imperfect part of who they are, but it's real.
Yeah.
I feel way easy. Like, it's easy to connect to something that's real than to have somebody show me a polished, perfect, empty thing about themselves.
Yeah.
Authenticity is connecting. And if we want connection, which is what human fulfillment comes from, we have to experience and give authenticity. We have to show who we really are, and we have to allow others to be themselves, and we can create such meaningful relationships when there's that honesty. And one of the things that happens with neurodivergence is we learn to mask a lot. And so I want to talk about masking. Ruth, do you want to talk about what masking is?
Yeah, so masking would be where essentially it's like a form of hypervigilance where we are constantly trying to mirror what it is that we feel other people are wanting from us or needing from us, or the way that other people maybe interact. Like, I do a really interesting piece of mirroring that is a kind of masking, which is where I'll take on parts of people's accent when I'm talking to them. And it's because we're trying so hard to make ourselves a relatable version of ourselves that we end up sort of holding our facial expressions in a certain way, or our tone of voice in a certain way,
or doing behaviors in a certain way. Like, when I'm around people, can manage certain aspects of my learning disabilities. It just takes a lot of effort. And then when I get home, I have way less effort to manage those kinds of things. So it's the ways that I interact in the world to try to look like I'm a normal person is how I would describe masking.
Yes. And it's expending a lot of energy doing it. It's really costly.
You'd imagine, like, it's having to think. So when we learn to open a door, the first time you open the door, it takes energy to open the door. After that, after you do it several times, it should go into your autonomic brain memory, which is like, now your brain is just doing it. So it's not taking any energy from you to open doors now. We open doors all the time without even thinking about it. And that's so nice, because it'd be overwhelming if we had to think about how to open a door every time we had to walk through one. And so what happens with masking is that things that often go into autonomic places for people, like how do I respond in a conversation? How do I give eye contact to somebody? How do I remember what I'm saying in this conversation? There's so many things that we have to do to try to look normal, and it's not autonomic for us. And so it begins to take so much energy, because you're having to think through so many things that other people may not be having to think through.
Yeah. It's like, it'd be like, you ever seen like a duck on the water or something, and it looks like really still on the on the top, and then underneath, like its legs are like going like bananas. That's a little bit like what the thought process in masking is. Like, is that too much? Is this too much? Hold eye contact. Hold it.
Yes.
Wait, no, do this.
I loved the part in Inside Out 2 where, have you seen it? Where she's like, how do I move my arms? How do I swing my arms? What do I do with that? You know, and like that is taking a lot of energy if you're having to think through, how do I move my arms? Walking now in a group is expending a ton of emotional energy. Whereas if you're just walking and you're not thinking about it, it's very easy. Well, I think this episode has been the most interesting because I was going to talk about getting diagnosed with ASD and my feelings around it and what it has been like for me. And I have been like crawling out of my skin the entire episode. Have you been able to tell? I've had so much sensory overload, which I think is probably heightened because of thinking that I'm about to talk about it. And, but I couldn't, like, I felt so overwhelmed. I have one issue that I have is my neck can get really sensitive. And so sensory issues. And so I was like feeling like I just needed to hold my neck and get my hair as far away from me as possible. And so I was so fidgety this whole episode until I had to put my hair up because it was like overwhelming me and consuming my brain. Now I was not masking well. If I was masking, and I do mask a lot with this sensation where I like find a way to not look like a crazy person that is like just trying to hold on to what is going on in my skin. But I don't know what to say about it because we don't really have time to go into it now.
No, we don't. Maybe at some point you can share that story. I think that'd be a good story to share.
Yeah.
Bring people into your process. Be really cool. I think that Ruth and I both agreed because at some point we did have a break here as you had to run off out of the room to do something. And we were laughing because we're like, does it feel like just talking about this neurodivergent subject has caused us all to feel even that much more fidgety? I'm like, oh my God, yes. I can't contain myself.
I was like, I lost my train of thought like 4 or 5 times.
Yeah, and the
during
last
that
time
conversation
that we did a podcast, you didn't lose your train of thought once.
Not once.
No.
Straight through.
It's complicated to talk about. It is tricky. Okay, so one thing that I will say, I did get diagnosed with ASD. We will talk about that in a future episode because there's so many things that has unlocked and opened up for me. But if you're wondering how to get diagnosed, I just want to help people because I had no idea about any of the things. I went to a psychiatrist. That's where I went when I was finding out about all of it, honestly. And there's a million tests that they give you and then they tell you. And it was very helpful for me to learn. The tests sucked. I hated doing them. If you have ADHD, the ADHD test is like they purposefully want to put you in hell. That's
Same for the dyslexia test.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, you just highlighted everything that I can't do. Thank you. I feel great.
It's funny.
But that's you can look up, and you can even just Google, how do I get diagnosed? If I think I have dyslexia, if I think I have ADHD, if I think I have, and you can actually do that. And I think it's very, something that can feel very powerful. And the other thing I want to end on is whatever way your mind works, whether it's been diagnosed with something or not, you're allowed to believe in yourself and have compassion towards yourself and be kind to yourself, even if the way you operate isn't the same as other people. And it's so important that we learn about how we work so that we can become powerful. And a lot of people in culture right now are using diagnoses as an excuse to get out of personal responsibility. And I believe that there is a middle ground. There are ways that my diagnoses have made it so that we've changed the different things that are expected from me. like you expect
There's a lot more grace, empathy, and compassion.
Yeah.
Injected into this.
And we've kind of found like, here are things that I am good at contributing and here are things I'm not good at contributing. And I still have to contribute certain things that are not easy for me. And also I focus my energy on the things that I can contribute well. Yeah. And so it's not like getting out of responsibility. Yeah. It's how do I live the best that I can with what I've been given.
Yeah. And there's ways that like an example for me would be I couldn't cook, right? When I was at university, everyone was like, Ruth should be on can't cook, won't cook. I was completely dependent on other people feeding me. And because it hit a really weird dyslexic spot of I can't sequence, I can't time manage, so I just can't cook. Yeah. And I had to go on the journey, you guys were there, of learning to cook with those like delivery boxes that they give you. Do you remember? And it gave you this like picture card that like broke down exactly what you had to do and when. And it was all sequential. So you did one after the other, after the other. And it measured out all the proportions for you already. And I just built my muscle of being able to cook by starting like that to the point now where I can't create a recipe by any means. I'm not a chef, but I can follow a recipe that I find on the internet and I can cook and I enjoy it and I can successfully feed myself now. And so I like what you're saying in that, my dyslexia makes that really difficult for me. But there's also an invitation there to find ways that we can be powerful in it.
Yeah. And I think to me, that is what acceptance is. I think about all the time the serenity prayer. Give me the grace to accept.
You gonna butcher this?
Yes. 100%. Did you see the look of panic in my eyes? Because I was like, I actually don't remember how it goes.
Look it up. No, not you. Our listeners.
Okay,
look up the serenity prayer.
It's basically like to accept the things to not try to control the things.
Still gonna try.
I'm gonna butcher it. Don't try to control the things you can't control.
Yeah.
Do be powerful over the things you do have power over. Accept what it is that you do have power over so that you can do something with that. Yeah. You're going to look it up for me? No, you're making a note?
Yeah. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference.
Yes.
What a great quote.
And I think that is such a beautiful quote and something that I try to live by with this. I'm going to accept that these are the limitations of how my mind works. And then I'm going to find a million hacks to help the impact. Because here's the truth. There's a lot of impact on people around us. And so my job is to not deny or be defensive about how my behavior is causing impact. If me being late all the time is hurting Justin's feelings, I actually still need to own that I'm impacting him, even if I'm time blind. And then I need to figure out systems. A great example of this, some reason I cannot remember certain appointments. And so I actually have just had friends remind me at that time of the day, you have this appointment, or employees. Sometimes that's their job, just to remind me of this thing. And there's just hacks that you can find around any problem that you're having. So this is your cue if you're listening and you relate to find the way to be powerful within how your mind works.
It's also your cue to hit the subscribe button on YouTube if you're over there right now. Go ahead and
remember,
poke the bell button.
Ding.
And the bell button's going to tell you, hey, you don't even have to think about it. We'll let you know.
Yeah.
We'll let you know, just like Abby.
We'll make your life easier.
No, we'll make it all easier.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, come hang out with us on YouTube. Ruth, is there any way that you want people to get a hold of you? And if not, that's totally okay.
No.
No.
Get lost, she says. Well, thanks for joining us, Ruth. It's been fun talking with you.
Good to see you guys.
This
has been chaotic.
That's what I have to say. Goodbye.
Goodbye.
Bye.